dark side. But I also want to kind of give you some very brief synopsis of his coming to power and his life. It's a fascinating story. There's a wonderful documentary, by the way, National Geographic documentary. In my library, it's free online. You know, if you have your library card, you can access online materials. And I would recommend that you watch The Lost Tomb of Herod the Great. The Lost Tomb of Herod the Great. I'll put this on our Facebook page along with some other resources. I've been asked a number of times about books. I also put up, you might have seen the one on Jerusalem, which is by far one of the best documentaries you'll ever see on Jerusalem, that was done just a couple of years ago. But this Lost Tomb of Herod the Great is about Ehud Netzer's journey to try to find this thing. It was a 40-year life passion to find the tomb of Herod. And that irony, that poetic irony that he died having thought he found it here. Of course, with all archaeological finds, there's always debates. But the best archaeologists, and I would say archaeologists of the salt of Jodi Magnus, have confirmed that Netzer's conclusions about this site seem to make the most sense. And we'll look at that mausoleum in a few minutes. Herod's story begins in the time of the late Hasmonean Empire, after Pompey had come in 63 and annexed the Hasmonean kingdom, which had been, in terms of geography, had ruled the extent of the former Davidic and Solomonic empires. It was a high point geopolitically for the people of the Jews. It was about a century of self-rule. After the Romans in 63 had annexed the kingdom, it wasn't until 1948 that there was again a self-rule, Jewish self-rule. So it was a major change. But Pompey had left in power one of the Hasmonean sons. His name was Hyrcanus II. And Hyrcanus' right-hand man was a man named Antipater. Antipater was the father of Herod. Herod's grandfather, not his great-grandfather, Herod's grandfather was named Antipas, and he had been forced to convert to Judaism a century before under the Hasmonean dynasty. When they occupied a region, they would force the inhabitants to either leave or become Jews, take up a Jewish way of being, or die. It's kind of not very good options, perhaps, when you think about it. But Herod's great-grandfather, I'm sorry, I keep making that mistake. Herod's grandfather, Antipas, had become a Jew. His father was a Jew. Herod was a Jew. In 40, there was an invasion by the Parthians in the east. They were the other superpower. You had the Romans on the west and the Parthians on the east. And the Parthians, led by a former Hasmonean, came and conquered this region and forced Herod to go on the run. His brother Phaziel, who Herod named one of those towers at his fortress, Phaziel committed suicide and Herod was on the run. And you heard the video. This site became very important to Herod because he won a battle and his mother, who had fallen, was okay. He got them to Masada, and then in 40 he made his way to Rome, where Mark Antony and Caesar Octavian had brought the Senate to give him the title King of the Jews. That was in 40. But this area was under the control of the Parthians, and so Herod had to come back with a legion of Roman troops and take it back. And it was a bloody battle. And Herod was resented by many through his whole reign because many Jews died as he reoccupied and re-Romanized this area. But once he secured his throne militarily, he began a cultural attempt to secure his throne. So he married a Hasmonean princess to try to co-opt the Hasmonean dynasty because he had no real claim to the throne of the King of the Jews. He wasn't a Davidic son. He wasn't a priest. He had no real claim to it. So he attempted to sort of make that claim through his marriages and his political maneuvers. Well, you know, at least probably enough, that Octavian and Mark Antony kind of became quick enemies. Their friendship was very tenuous, and so they became enemies. And finally, at Actium, which was just in the Aegean Sea area, Octavian defeated Mark Antony. And during that war, actually, Herod was on Mark Antony's side. He was one of Mark Antony's allies. So as soon as the war was over, Augustus was on Rhodes. I think, Scott, you're visiting Rhodes, right? You and Chris are going to spend some time on Rhodes. He was on Rhodes, and so Herod made a beeline to Rhodes to meet Augustus. Can you imagine? He was on the losing side. He goes to Augustus, and he makes the speech of his life to Augustus. He says, "I was faithful to Antony, and I will be as faithful to you." And Augustus receives him and installs him as king of the Jews, and even more so, gives him even more land to rule. It doesn't take long to see Herod was a political animal. He was amazing at the politics of the time. He knew just how to play the sides. He knew how to be Jewish enough to keep the peace, and he knew how to be Hellenistic and Roman enough to be successful. Scholars, historians tell us that Herod was the best of Augustus's clients, kings, in the way he ruled and managed his kingdom. And some people say that Herod was an evil tyrant, and there is no doubt he has that side. But it also needs to be said that Herod made many benefactions to the people here. It would probably surprise you to hear that Herod actually cut taxes on several occasions when there was famine to relieve some of the pressure financially of the people here. So there were a lot of people that did really well during the time of Herod, and there were a lot of people that didn't do very well, much like perhaps contemporary politics. But all along, Herod's reign was very tenuous because he had taken this land militarily, and he didn't have a true right to be king. And so that, along with probably a mental disorder that probably some today medication would have helped a lot for him, he became increasingly more paranoid. When he died in Jericho, he died a very sick and delusional individual. Just to give you one case in point, Josephus tells us not only did he murder the fifth of the sons he had murdered in that last week of his life, but he also had his sister arrange for all the influential people to be gathered in the hippodrome at Jericho, so that on his death, the word would be given and all of those influential people would be killed, and then there would be mourning for his death. Apparently he was afraid that there wouldn't be sufficient lamentation because of his death. Thankfully, his sister did not carry out his plan, and those influential people were released. But it gives you a little bit of an insight into this amazing historical figure that has marked geographically, culturally, and historically the story of the New Testament. It's partly why I'm so kind of enthralled by this historical individual. Now, the story in Matthew 2, I think, will then mean a little bit more when you read it in the context of the late Herodian reign. This story takes place around probably between 7 BC and 5 BC. We think Jesus was born somewhere around there. Herod dies in 4 BC. So this is very close to the end of his reign, perhaps when he's most delusional. And we're told in chapter 2 in verse 13 that after the Magi had gone, Joseph received a dream, and this is what it says. When they had gone, that is the Magi, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So they got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I have called my son. Verse 16, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old or under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. This story is only told in Matthew, which has caused some skeptics to wonder if Matthew sort of made it up, because this part of Matthew is clearly echoing and shaped by the story of Moses. So maybe there's an attempt to shape the story of Jesus toward the story of Moses. Herod is sort of a new Pharaoh. And so there's been criticism and skepticism about, can we really say that Herod would have done such an act, killing, massacring children? And the answer is, the historical question is obviously difficult to answer. We can't corroborate the story. However, it certainly fits both the historical moment in time. I mean, this is ancient times. This isn't modern times. This kind of stuff happened all the time. But secondly, this is the kind of thing that external sources outside the Bible sort of reveal about the kind of person Herod was, particularly at this late stage of his career. So I think it makes a lot of historical sense that this story would have taken place because of the kind of person Herod was, particularly at this very near end of his reign. So that's the talk on Herod. Just a little bit of orientation. This tower is facing sort of north and east towards Jerusalem and towards the Judean wilderness. It's really in the direction of his palace in Jericho, and it would have been the highest point. You've seen the model over there. And this, what we see, kind of the inside of a volcano, was the sort of the insides of this palace that would have gone up, several stories from where we're standing. It's as if it's been cut off, and we're looking down at the base of it, and we have to imagine what's up here. In any case, we're going to go down and have a devotion, I believe, in the synagogue, if it's available.